Good afternoon. I'm Kim Knox, President of the League of Women Voters of San Diego. I want to thank you all for joining us today. And I want to let you know about some upcoming events related to the primary election on March 5th. We will be hosting candidate forums for City Council candidates in District 3, 4, and 9. The District 3 forums, there's one on January 31st and one on February 19th. District 9, February 1st, and the one for District 4 is to be determined. Other election resources are the Vote 411 is our election resource voter guide, online voter guide. Formerly, we used Voter's Edge. We're now using Vote 411, which is made by the League of Women Voters Education Fund. And so these bookmarks are in the back. So you can type in your address, get your personalized ballot, and compare the candidates and measures using that website. We also have a handout on the pros and cons. This one comes from the League of Women Voters of California, and it's a write-up on Proposition 1, which will be on the March 5 ballot related to mental health treatment facilities. So we did have, you probably read in the newspaper this morning that the County Board of Supervisors voted unanimously yesterday to invest $1.25 million in infrastructure for childcare facilities and spend $750,000 on a database that will show openings and closings of childcare facilities, and also a peer-based mentorship program. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. Now I'd like to introduce our education chair, Penny Adler.
Well, thank you for all being here. I know so many people now do Zoom, but we felt this was very important to have an opportunity to interact, discuss, ask questions, and so on. So we're pleased that you have chosen to be here with us. And as was mentioned by Kim, finally, the city, the county are recognizing the great importance of childcare and the fact that for years and years we've not had enough facilities, we don't have enough workers, and it's been a real crisis. And finally now we'll be talking about our city's program, our county's programs, and we're finally moving in the right in the right direction.
There we go.
Which is really important. So today we have group of a really knowledgeable panel that will each be presenting to 10-15 minutes about their topics, and I'll tell you who they all are. If you have a question for clarification, please ask. Otherwise, kind of hold question, and when the program is done, we'll have the opportunity for questions, discussions, and so on. So our panel members first will be Sarina, Lynn. Sarina is the Director of Community Engagement for Educational Enrichment Systems, which is a large, can't remember how many programs you have, you'll tell them. 19. Oh. Anyway, many programs. Needless to say, she's very familiar with the crisis, the issues, and the problems with having these facilities. And so she'll be talking about the problems with the workforce and the challenges, really. Then will be Andrea O'Hara and Tara. They both work. Andrea is the executive director and Tara the program coordinator for the City of San Diego Office of Child and Youth Success. And they will talk about what is the role of their office, recent kind of survey, I guess you did, and kind of the real direction they're going, and really the assistance they're going to need to open up more and more facilities. Next will be Sarah Glass, and Sarah is the Deputy Director of the Office of Child and Family Strengthening, the County of San Diego. And the county, in the last year or so, opened up an office for I think it's a health and human service agency. And she again will be discussing the role of the agency, the direction that they're going. So to me, it's very exciting that the city and the county have finally recognized the importance of children and having access for them to get care and assistance. And then will be Des Martinez is the coordinator of early education special projects for the San Diego County office, and a blueprint kind of has been developed, and she will be talking a little bit about the blueprint. And then last but certainly not least is Blake, and Blake Hofsted is the director of California Parent Voices. And he will be talking a little bit about his organization and then about some of the legislation, current and things that they're looking in the direction of hopefully getting them to pass. So without further ado, Sarina, thank you.
Thanks, Penny. Okay. Oh, good. That fits perfectly. Can everybody hear me? Okay. I just wanted, before I introduce myself a little bit more, I wanted to just get a poll around the room. I see a lot of familiar faces, which is awesome. But why are you interested in childcare, or why are you here today? Are you a current parent, grandmother, teacher, early educator? I just want to kind of get a sense of the room. Does anyone want to raise their hand, or just, yeah, sure, thank you.
I'm a parent.
Parent, okay. And how old's your?
She's almost 30.
Beautiful. I have a 4 and a 7-year-old, so you're right on the schedule. Okay. Anybody? Yeah.
I'm just a citizen. I don't have kids.
Okay. You don't have to have children.
I don't know literally anything about it, so I feel like I need to know something.
Love it. Okay. I'm going to do a deep dive. Yeah, go ahead.
Grandparent.
Grandparent. Okay. Awesome.
A parent and early educator.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. And Sarah works with me as well. Has a young one. Did I see another hand? Okay. Well, that's good. Okay. So we have a diverse group, so that's exciting. And I see a lot of faces that I see a lot at early education events. I want to do just kind of an quick intro to myself. As Penny mentioned, I work for Educational Enrichment Systems, and we're a nonprofit early education agency. We have 19 different school sites across San Diego County, and we're part of what's called a subsidized program. So we're subsidized by the state to serve low-income families. And so that's a little bit about who I work for. We have sites in Vista, Linda Vista, and South Bay. And then I'm also a mother of a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, and I'm also current chair of the local planning council. And that's another place to get information. It's called the San Diego Childcare and Development Planning Council. Maybe we should change the name to be shorter, but not yet. But that's another place where people come together and convene and talk about issues in San Diego related to childcare and some of the emerging best practices. And I think Penny highlighted this, but I just want to thank the county and the city. It is huge steps forward for San Diego to have the city and the county aligned in prioritizing childcare. And prioritizing childcare, as we all know in this room, means prioritizing children and families. So it's doing a holistic view of families with children, without children, because you're getting people back into the workforce. When we talk about workforce, who am I talking about? So I'm talking about the women, a majority of women of color. Over 98% of the people in the early child care and education field are women, and a majority are women of color. And they are really the linchpin of program quality and support. So when we think of program quality, we have to look at the early educator, because they have all the interaction with the children, with your child, with your grandchild, with my children. So when we talk about quality, a really key piece is the educator themselves and their nurturing their nurturing nature. And many of these women, and I just want to highlight this because I think when we say childcare, sometimes people are thrown off, but many of these women have years and years of experience. They're trained in culturally, linguistically, and developmentally appropriate practices, and they have early education units, either college units, community college units. So these are women that are professionals. So I just want to, when we talk about early educators, I want to make sure, look at the camera, I want to make sure that we speak to them as professionals, and the professionals they are, and thank them for the work that they do every day to take care of San Diego's youngest and most vulnerable children. Okay, types of program. Let's do like a broad overview, and please ask questions. If I'm going too fast, if I'm going too slow, I don't know what to do about it, but if I'm going too fast, just let me know. Okay, so what I call the early care and education workforce, I like to just shorten it by ECE. So ECE, early care and education. They care for children in various different types of environments. So funding-wise, there are state and federally subsidized programs dedicated to serve at-risk, low-income children and families. So that, like Educational Enrichment Systems, EES, is state subsidized. So we're dedicated to serve low-income families. There's also private tuition programs that serve families, and the families pay tuition to those programs. So those are kind of just funding buckets, but they also serve in different environments. So there are center-based programs that look a little bit more like schools. So they have a teacher, they usually has a classroom, usually has more than one classroom on a site. And then there's what's called home-based centers or family childcare homes, where the early educator works in their home with the children in their home. So that's just kind of a broad overview of the buckets of where people serve and how they serve. And the best thing about that is it's a mixed delivery system that's based on parent choice and parent empowerment. So parents can choose what is right for their child and what is right for their family. Some programs are part day only, and that does not work for working families. If both parents or the single parent is in the workforce, they need a full day program. Some families want to be close to home or close to their work. And some of the most culturally and linguistically appropriate programs are family childcare homes that are run in the home by women that match the demographic of the children that they serve. So that's kind of a big bucket. Let me go down here real quick. And so when we talk about all of these programs together, I like to refer to them, this is not my word choice, someone else created this, as a mixed delivery system. So it is the strength of a mixed delivery system that serves the diverse needs of all children and families. Okay, now when we talk about the workforce crisis, I was at the Board of Supervisors meeting, or I phoned into the Board of Supervisors meeting yesterday, and there was some talk back about that it's not a crisis. Everything is a crisis. Why are you making everything a crisis? It is a crisis. We are talking about parents and families that want to go to work and there aren't enough childcare slots to take care of their children. So if you don't have the support of family, if your parents or grandparents or even friends aren't able to take your child and you need to go to work, you need care. And every single family deserves quality care. They need a safe environment for their child. So the workforce crisis in particular, it's not a new crisis. And I just want to quote this because this is a crazy stat. So according to a recent report by the University of Berkeley's Center for Study of Childcare Employment, early childhood educators have one of the worst paid jobs in the United States, with 98% of all other jobs paid higher wages. 98%. And these are the women of color, that are taking care of our youngest and most vulnerable children. And I think about my own child, my own children. I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, so one is still in a program, the other has moved on to first grade. But they, like all other children in San Diego, deserve a safe place to go and learn and play.
I have a question.
Yes, talk to me.
Is minimum wage having anything to do with that?
That's a great question. So minimum wage, as minimum wage increases for state subsidized programs like ours, so the reimbursement rate is set by the state, they don't bump the reimbursement rate up to accommodate for the minimum wage increase. So what ends up happening is we are stagnated by our contract to pay a certain level, and it's not kept up with inflation, it's not kept up with minimum wage. I agree with you. I think it should be. But it's not. So we, of course, have to pay minimum wage, but what that ends up doing is lowering the levels that we can pay our staff. So you would have less pay difference from like a master teacher that has a BA or a master's in early childhood education units, and an instructional assistant that's just coming in maybe with 6 early childhood education units. So it just really condenses that. So minimum wage, and it is, I mean, there are some, I think the state they were having conversations about fast food workers and them earning $20 an hour. And I just, so that this is a choice that families have to make as a mother. You have to choose, like, if you want to work if you want to work in early childhood education, going into it that the pay is not high. But these women do it out of love and respect and dedication to the children. So I just, thank you for that question. So I also want to quote, I think we need to, and I want to quote it because I don't want to, so the recent California Rate and Quality Stakeholder Work Group report. So there was a group that was convened by the state of California to discuss early childcare and discuss workforce. So what should workforce reimbursement look like? What should the rate that we pay? What is the true cost of childcare? And they said, we need to recognize that centuries of racist and sexist policies have resulted in chronic underfunding for early learning and care programs and an overall failure of the government to treat early learning and care services as a public good. Over time, these policies and structures have resulted in early learning and care market failure. And so talking about a market failure, what is a market failure? I think hopefully an easy way to look at this. Families cannot afford to pay more. So families are already paying a lot of money for their childcare programs. In a private tuition-based program, the average is like $1,000 to $1,800 a month. So these programs but the programs, as they're running, are running on a slim margin. They are hardly getting by. And why is that? Why is childcare, why is quality childcare so expensive? And that's because you want to have low ratios. You want to have one-on-one interaction with your children. So for infants, for 0 to 2-year-olds, a 1 to 3 is common. 1 teacher and 3 children. And that includes a space. They need a diaper changing room. They need books. They need curriculum. They need professional development. There's a ton of stuff that goes into early childhood education as a profession. Just as school districts do a lot in their curriculum, K through 12, early educators, same thing. Early learning and care programs do not receive sufficient revenue, either by private pay, so tuition programs, or by the state reimbursement rate, the state subsidized rate, to afford the true cost of care. And so this workforce study, the workforce report, did a study about what would the true cost of care be. And so they're working on that right now. I think I'm gonna let some of my fellow panelists talk about that, but that is in the works, and that's something League of Women Voters and other individuals in the audience, if we're thinking about a way to really change childcare in California and embrace and empower the workforce, paying the workforce competitive professional wages is the first step. And that's for recruitment and retention. And this goes into the ECE workforce. It's underpaid, results in early educator shortage and excessive turnover. So that's what we see. But what is so brilliant about our early education workforce is that these dedicated women stay in the field and have been in the field for years, do not leave, knowing that they are earning. The system is basically built on their backs. So I just want to, if you can imagine that, just imagine the women that are working and taking the wages that they know are not what they are worth to serve your children and your families. I'm going to talk quickly. I'm not sure how I am on time. Maybe I won't talk quickly. No. Yes. Okay. I don't want to run anybody off I thought I was going to go too short here. No, I'm doing good. Okay. I just wanted to quickly touch on. I'm sure some of you may or may not have questions about transitional kindergarten and the impact of transitional kindergarten on. And I would be remiss if I didn't say there were unintended consequences of transitional kindergarten that has severely impacted the early childhood education workforce, and it exacerbated what we are referring to as the workforce crisis. So one of the things that I'll mention is that transitional kindergarten is for school districts to run 4-year-old programs. Which used to be run by programs in the early education field. And so the 4-year-olds, when you look at the cost of care, 4 and 5-year-olds, the ratio is, this is just a general ratio would be 1 adult to 8 children. But when we talk about infants, they're 1 to 3, and toddlers are 1 to 4. So just on staffing alone, infants and toddlers are exorbitantly more expensive to serve. And so asking the early childhood education field to switch and transition to serve the 0 to 3 population requires more funding. In addition to being underfunded from the beginning, serving 0 to 5, we are now severely impacted being asked to serve 0-3, which is a much more expensive population to serve. And then last but not least, no, I think that's good. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay.
Except, you know what, I just want to get this mic up, just because we want to hear every word. And you are tall people.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, great.
Want to introduce?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. My name is Andrea O'Hara. I'm the Executive Director for the new Office of Child and Youth Success at the City of San Diego.
I'm Tara Ryan, also with OCYS, and I'm a program coordinator focused on childcare and early learning.
And so Sarina was nice enough to give us a landscape of what's happening right now within our childcare community. Tara and I were hired to create solutions to the problems that exist with our childcare community. And so today we're going to talk to you about some of the efforts that the City of San Diego is working on to address some of those challenges that Sarina has laid out for you.
Next slide. Okay, so the first sort of strategy that the city is focusing on, you may or may not have heard of Measure Age, but San Diego City voters passed Measure Age just over a year ago, November of 2022. And Measure Age changes the city charter to allow childcare on parks and recreation space. So previously, space designated as park and recreation space, city-owned property, can only be used for parks and recreation activities. So now with the passage of Measure Age, childcare is an allowable use on those spaces. And so right now, we're working very hard in collaboration with Parks and Rec to figure out how to implement Measure Age. Measure Age did not come with funding, it just created this allowance, but there was no funding behind it. So I visited almost all of the city's recreation centers, over 50 of them, looking for where is there potentially viable space for childcare. So what you're seeing up on the screen are just some of the highlights. We're looking at existing recreation centers or park spaces, other buildings on park space. This would be a dedicated space for childcare, so we're talking about licensed childcare. Targeting spaces that we know are high need, so spaces that are already identified as what are considered childcare deserts, or identified by the local planning council as high priority areas for subsidized care. We are looking to, the city won't be operating these programs. Eventually, when we have spaces identified and kind of ready to go, we'll be issuing solicitations for community-based providers to come in and operate the programs. And Sarina mentioned sort of different age groups, right? We know that the highest need is for infant and toddler care. Sarina laid out some of the reasons for that, and also full day care, full year care for working families. So that's the intention. I think that's it sort of on the operational pieces I mentioned. We're still really the need right now is to identify funding to either bring existing recreation centers or other facilities kind of up to what we would consider license ready for an operator to come and operate those programs. And Jane, you can advance to the next slide, please.
Can I ask a quick
Sure.
question? Where do you think funding should come? And then, is this one of the rec centers that you would consider?
There already is actually a, no, this isn't the site that has an existing program. This isn't identified as one of the highest need locations based on the data that we have, but we're, ultimately we would consider, there's need all across the city, right? And so ultimately we would consider every location, including this one. I'm gonna let Andrea answer where she thinks funding should come from the city's perspective.
Well, I'll say that Tara, in her visitation to all the rec centers, not only looked, personally went out there and surveyed the space, but she also looked at various data points that have been collected by experts like Sarina and the local planning council, the YMCA and UCSD, when they, over the years, have collected all this data where the highest need exists. And so through the priority ranking, the 50 plus recreation centers have been given a priority score. So working with Parks and Recreation, they have identified some pilot locations that we can go ahead and start targeting based on the highest need and the space availability and the easiest kind of being able to get in there and start to utilize the room and the facilities now. Where funding should come from. I'm not an expert on where funding should come from. So I can't answer that exactly. However, we have been very creative at looking at some opportunities that exist currently in the city where we can reutilize some existing revenue, but then also looking at, future revenue opportunities, I think is a must. The city of San Diego doesn't have a fund that's dedicated to children and youth priorities. That could certainly be an opportunity that the city or county explores to have sustainable funding that doesn't go away, that we know we're contributing into a certain allocation to utilize to address childcare, children priorities, youth priorities. So that could be an option. There are certainly one-time funds that are available either through federal and state opportunities, so we've been exploring that. And as we work with foundations and kind of, talk through this process, there's certainly been some interest in supporting the expansion of some of these programs as well.
Now I'm going to
Oh, great.
Thank you. So as we know that the real need is for licensed childcare, as I mentioned, full day, full year programs, especially for infants and toddlers. As we're kind of getting ready on that front, we're also looking at what are other opportunities we can provide for families sooner. And so we're looking at various sort of unlicensed programs. One is STEM based, so STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. STEM based pre-K programs. These would be unlicensed, sort of less formal programs. There are specific sort of parameters around programs to operate where they don't have to be licensed. So there's a maximum number of hours per week, a maximum sort of length of a program session, to keep them more sort of recreational, not really formal licensed childcare. So we're looking at the same sort of prioritized sites that Andrea mentioned for piloting to implement some of these pre-kinder programs. These would be at recreation centers. There's not as much of a need to bring them up with facility improvements that would be needed for licensed childcare programs. But these programs can operate kind of quicker. They can be a little more nimble. We would also offer a solicitation for community providers that have the experience and capacity to run these programs to come in and run those. And again, targeting sort of the highest need locations through sort of a pilot. At the same
Before Tara jumps into the next option, I just want to mention when we're looking at these, part day programs, these early learning spaces and opportunities for young children, we were considering the fact that there are some that operate in the city now and how we can expand those, because the ones that are operating in the city now are in areas that were not considered priority areas for the city of San Diego. There where families can afford, $300 a week for 12 hours, a week, $300. So when we're considering how do we expand that into some of the areas that can't, we're also looking at ways to subsidize the cost for those and make them more readily available to our community. And when we think about, our gig workers or students or part-time workers, a 3-hour option may be all that they need if they have, grandma or grandpa at home, or a neighbor that can watch for the later part of the day. It's also important to know that when we're looking at formalized licensed childcare, that could be a 1 to 2 year process going through a capital improvement project through the city. We don't have 1 to 2 years to wait to offer additional space. And so we were looking at how can we pilot something that can support families now while we internally work through that 1 to 2 year capital improvement project.
Thanks. Another area that we're looking to support is what we're calling outdoor preschool nature camps. So these are other programs that are kind of operating already. They really sprung up during the pandemic when there was a need for outdoor programming and still some kind of opportunities for children while their families are working. And so there's a number of these programs operating kind of under the radar on city park space, but without going through really the process in place to get a park use permit and sort of, go through the typical process. And so as we became more aware of these programs, we want these programs to be able to operate because they definitely are serving a need, and it's a great opportunity for families to make that choice that Sarina was speaking to earlier. But we want to ensure that the children in these programs are safe, and also that there's appropriate use of city park space. And so we've, again, been working in collaboration with Parks and Rec to go through a process to pre-qualify programs. We'll be issuing what's called a request for service qualifications soon. So with specific sort of requirements or restrictions about how these programs can operate. These are not programs that ever would be licensed because they don't operate in a facility. Licensing, community care licensing for childcare operates specific facilities, not programs. So these programs operate outside on the open spaces, in canyonlands, out on trails, and it's really a sort of nature-based learning experience for the children. And so we are looking at where can we pull best practices. Are there licensing regulations that we want to kind of pull and require those for these types of programs to operate? And so we're going through that process right now, and hopefully in the next few months we'll be issuing a solicitation for programs to be qualified, and then they would go through the regular processes that are already supposed to be in place for programs to use park space, and that would be a park use permit. And these are for 3 and 4-year-olds as well. Question?
Are the operators going to be required to pay for the park space or the building space?
They would pay there's already a fee schedule to acquire a park use permit, so those fees would apply, yes.
So that's probably a problem already. If you're trying to reduce the cost of childcare.
For the outdoor nature camps, right now they're operating in park space without paying any fees. Yes,
So for the buildings.
it would be the same.
My question would be on the policing of it. So let's say you have an acquaintance who has a group of small children, 5 or 6, and she wants to use a park, and she doesn't really know anything about any of the regulatory requirements. How are you actually going to educate people as to, that they need a permit, and that, and then policing of the actual groups? Is that park, it's Parks and Rec that would have to, if they're seeing continually the same group week after week after week, because you see a lot, even with the personal training situation, they're using the park on a, it's similar.
So that's kind of already what's been happening, right? Is these programs sort of get discovered by Parks and Rec staff, including park rangers. And so if there's a program operating, there's specific, if you have a park use permit, you're supposed to carry that with you, et cetera. And so I believe that once this arrangement becomes implemented, that Park and Rec staff, including the park rangers, if they're running into programs, they can just share the information with them about the process they should go through and open up communication that way.
Questions? Yeah, great questions. So I'm going to talk to you right now a little bit of the child and youth plan in which we're in development. When I was hired in April of 2022, yes, there was no plan on how the office should operate and very minimal budget. And so working with other cities in the United States that have created offices dedicated to children and youth priorities, the first thing I thought of was, well, we need a plan. And so that's what we did. We started with a contract with a community provider to help facilitate listening sessions, town halls, focus groups. And over the last year, we've heard from quite a few youth, families, and a few children that popped up in our focus groups. And so now in the next month, we'll be coming forward with a draft child and youth plan. We heard from 300 youth last summer over various focus groups. The topics that the plan will incorporate includes childcare, but also touches on education and career workforce opportunities, talks about engaging activities, also youth empowerment, which we heard was really important to the youth in San Diego, learning how to navigate city government, how to speak up, how to provide their input into city and municipality planning. And so we wanted to make sure that the Child and Youth Plan wasn't just specific for the city operations, but also for those involved in the community to know how that they're going to partner with making sure that, you know, the city is looking to the community to support children, youth priorities. And so that plan will be in draft form and ready to present to City Council and the mayor in April. We'll have it published on the website in March, so those interested can review the draft plan and provide input on all of the data points that we collected, the solutions and concerns that we've heard over the last year, and including, you know, childcare is one of those. It's important to note that we didn't do focus groups and steering committees dedicated to childcare because we've been working very closely with the County of San Diego and the local planning council and Children's First Collective to understand the San Diego County blueprint, the childcare blueprint, and Des will talk a little bit about that. So we've incorporated those findings into the city's child and youth plan to make sure that we weren't duplicating efforts, that we weren't oversaturating the community on what needs to happen in childcare, because we know. And so we're incorporating where the city's showing up to support those efforts in our plan. So, yep. So the objectives of the Child and Youth Plan are, let's see, I've lost my slide here. Okay. We have 3 objectives. The first was to create a culture of trust and transparency into the planning process. We did that by having 9 virtual town halls co-hosted with 9 city council members. We had focus groups led by grassroots partners and heard from over 300 youth during the summer. And then October, November, and December, we had 12 steering committee sessions where we had about 20 different nonprofits, organizations come to every of the steering committees to provide what we considered a SWOT analysis of our systems here in San Diego. So we looked at the strengths of our community. We had very deep conversation about the weaknesses of our community, and we talked about opportunities that exist. So that will be included in the Child and Youth Plan. Also, so I talked a little bit about objective number 2, so including the stakeholders, our community groups, parents, and youth. We also worked very closely with San Diego Unified, which is one of the largest school districts that operate in the city of San Diego. So they were really dedicated to ensuring that their voice and their staff had participated in our steering committees, which they did, and it was really great to hear. And then lastly, we talked a little bit about funding. Where does the funding come from? Well, it's leveraging all of the assets that we have, current assets in the city of San Diego, private and public assets, and really designing a blueprint on how we can create sustainable goals for long-term solutions. And so that's really important too, that this blueprint isn't just a published, here it is, another strategic plan. This is really an investment in our community, and that's why it's important to engage all of public-private community members into the planning of this blueprint. And so I think we're getting close to the end. We also aligned not only with the San Diego County Childcare Blueprint, but we also worked very closely with our Economic Development Department, who, if you look in their strategic plan, you'll see childcare outlined quite a bit as an investment in our community. So making sure we've incorporated some of their priorities, as well as the local planning council and participating in those quarterly meetings and showing up to know how the city can be a better partner in creating more facilities and opportunities for childcare.
And then our last slide really is just kind of an overview of the Office of Child and Youth Success with the focus on early learning and childcare. And so Andrea came up with the acronym of OFFER, which really sort of captures the different focus areas that our office will be working on specifically around childcare and early learning. So O is about operations, right? All of the pieces that the city has a part in, including making the permit process easier for new center-based child care providers to open up a licensed facility, for example. Facilities, a big part of the shortage of child care is due to facilities, and a big part of the cost of care that was mentioned is due to facilities as well. Funding, as we've talked about a couple of times today, there's definitely a need for increased funding both from the state level, local level, all of the different sort of areas of child care to support. Education, so supporting the workforce with ongoing access to different education pathways so that they can continue their own professional growth, continue to advance in their own career. And then recruitment. There is a shortage right now of the child care workforce at all levels. And so how can the city step up to support recruitment efforts of our community's providers? And that's it from OCYS.
Hi. Am I too loud? Because my family is like, you're too loud, so I don't want to be yelling up here. Okay, if I'm too loud, just give me that cringe face and I'll stop. Hi everybody, I'm Sarah Glass and I'm the Deputy Director with the County of San Diego Child and Family Wellbeing Department. You might know this department formerly as Child Welfare Services or Child Protective Services. So I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about our reorganization of the department, which we have just completed. And I'm also here to talk to you about our new office, which is my office, and that is called the Office of Child and Family Strengthening. So if you have questions, please chime in. I was gonna put org chart copies, but the more I look at it, the more I don't know that I should do that because it's probably easier to just explain than to show you a visual. So I'll try to explain that. Historically here in San Diego County, at least, child welfare was structured a little bit uniquely compared to other jurisdictions. Federally, the field of child welfare varies from state to state. There's certain federal requirements that every jurisdiction has to comply with, and then there's state and local ones. So federally, some states operate their own child welfare system. That's what California does. So everything is directed by the Department of Social Services at the state level, and then each of the 58 counties in our state determine how they're going to implement certain requirements. So it looks 58 different ways. Locally, we had also been divided regionally into 6 different regional locations throughout the county. That created, in one way, there's pluses and minuses to doing things regionally. And we had every program within child welfare, which there are many, was regionally located. And that was a struggle because families were experiencing different things depending on where they lived. So we were not providing equitable services, and that was heard loud and clear over the last few years. And so we decided as a department to make that shift. And what really started this shift was the passing of the federal legislation called the Family First Prevention Services Act. Some of you may have heard of that. That is passed in 2018, and really what that does is it sort of flips the funding for child welfare. So historically, we have been funded federally and from a state level on how many kids we have in foster care. So if there were a lot of kids in foster care, then there was more funding for that system. And so what we're doing is putting funding towards prevention. And so that is the basis for the growth and the development of the Office of Child and Family Strengthening, is to really get upstream and look at child abuse prevention in our community in a different way that some entities have done historically and others haven't. And so child welfare has come a long way in that shift. And what we've done is shifted the department, which contains 1,700 staff. It is one of the larger county departments. There's 1,700 people providing child welfare services across the county at any given day. Many of them are case-carrying social workers.
So the case carrying social workers, the majority of them are contained within our Office of Child Safety, which is where the traditional child welfare services are housed. So we have a child abuse hotline, and we have investigations that happen, open cases. We work very closely with our juvenile court system. So that office will probably always remain. Our goal is that that office has a smaller workload over time because they're serving less families, because we're serving the families upstream. So that is the vision for the Child and Family Strengthening Office. And the way that we are doing that is through a few different ways. The first way is really looking at what prevention services we offer in our county. Historically, First 5 San Diego has offered many child abuse prevention services. First 5 San Diego is within the Office of Child and Family Strengthening. And the other thing that we're doing, which we have a procurement out right now, the county has a contract procurement going for what we're calling prevention hubs. And those are going to be one-stop shops for families in the community to get child abuse prevention related services. We're hoping that through that, one of the things that we like about Family First Prevention Services Act is it eliminates the income criteria for our families. So a lot of times things, eligibility can get determined by income, and so this takes that away, and this is really for every family that needs additional supports. So we have a vision for it. We're waiting for a contractor to come on board to really begin that planning with them. And then the other component of the Office of Child and Family Strengthening is our childcare system. So the county, our self-sufficiency department, which is a different department, they run the subsidy for the county for CalWORKs. So if a family has CalWORKs eligibility, and they may have childcare eligibility through CalWORKs. However, we did not have a county office that was dedicated to coordinating with all of our partners with all of the things childcare related. And so that new office, the goal is to implement the childcare blueprint, which Des is going to talk to you about next. And one of the things that we did here, we've also done a lot of listening forums in the community over the last few years, and what became really apparent was that childcare is a struggle for all of the families. I had personally struggled with finding good quality childcare myself, so I know that that is an issue for many families, and we know that high quality, affordable childcare does reduce the occurrence of maltreatment in children. And so our goal as a department is to really get behind that shift and make sure that we are supporting things through the implementation of the blueprint. So I would love to talk to you about the park facilities that you were talking about. And I talk fast, so I can pass it to Des unless anybody has any questions. Okay.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Des Martinez. I work for the San Diego County Office of Education. We serve separately, we serve as a different agency than the County of San Diego. We're the County Office of Education. So we work a little bit differently, but we work so closely together when it comes to the child care blueprint, early learning care services. I will be talking with you about the blueprint right now, but before I go into the details, I want to share with you a little bit about how it came about. So a lot of the information, almost all of it, within the Child Care Blueprint came from the work of the Child Care and Development Local Planning Council. The Child Care and Development Local Planning Council is a group of about 40 individuals, and their task is to advise the County Board of Supervisors and the County Board of the County Superintendent of Schools on all things related to early learning and care for mixed delivery systems, so different settings for children ages 0 to 12. Now, this particular group is tasked with identifying what the needs are in the county and determining how to best mitigate those needs or overcome those barriers. So in 2021, this group, the Child Care and Development Local Planning Council here in San Diego County, pulled together a child care plan. Then in 2022, the County of San Diego held a child care conference. They recognized the crisis, especially as it had been exacerbated by the COVID pandemic. And by 2023, the child care blueprint was adopted. It was used. So we have worked together with the County of San Diego and the Child Care and Development Local Planning Council to develop this blueprint holistically. Now, what I want to say is that there have been so many wonderful things that have been done to support or mitigate the crisis, The truth is, it's just not enough. There's so many wonderful things. There's so many things that have been done. It's just not enough. So I'm going to go into some of the goals of the Child Care Blueprint, the way in which we think we might meet those goals, and what's been accomplished so far. The first main goal of the Child Care Blueprint has to do with the workforce. So you heard quite a bit from Sarina, the need of our workforce members. Like I said, part of the local planning council is to do needs assessment, and some of that includes data, lots of data. So some of the things we found out is that here in San Diego County, the average child care provider makes about $35,000 annually. Compare that to the self-sufficiency wage in San Diego County for a family of 4 with 2 young children. That's about $113,000 to $118,000. So you see the discrepancy there and why this is a crisis when it comes to workforce members. Our hope eventually, and I'll read you the direct goal so I don't get anything wrong here, is that the child care workforce is well trained, supported, valued as a profession, and paid competitive wages. We're not there yet, but we're doing things to help. And luckily, we are getting some funding from the state and from the county to make this happen. So the state of California offers a few grants that the San Diego County Office of Education has received to support workforce members in either advancing their career or starting a career in early childhood education. One of those is the Workforce Pathways Grant. This offers stipends to individuals who complete college coursework units or individuals who complete professional development hours, so if they go to trainings. We have another grant called the EETD, Early Educator Teacher Development Grant, and this is the one that supports those who are looking to get a pathway towards a teaching credential, so perhaps they want to work for a school district in early childhood education. We've also received some support from the County of San Diego using ARPA funding, and this is called the Childcare Workforce Investment Program. This is going to allow us to offer conferences with training for early learning and care providers at a very low to no cost. It's also going to offer the opportunity to pay upfront costs of college tuition. That way those who can't even afford to pay for college in the beginning, they're not necessarily being reimbursed, but they're actually having the coursework covered. The coursework, the books, parking fees, things of that sort. It's also going to cover some stipends to try and get our workforce members to remain in the field of early childhood education. So if a workforce member anywhere across the county has been working within their facility for the past 9 months, they get a stipend just for staying. So these are some of the things we've done to support the workforce members. Obviously, this is not yet enough, but it's quite a bit, right? It's a lot and not enough. It's a start. Thank you, Penny. It's definitely a start. We want to keep going, though. The next goal is about our facilities. So you've heard quite a bit about facilities from the City of San Diego, and I'll read the goal directly. It's safe and quality facilities are developed and renovated to expand child care programs, particularly in geographic areas where child care is scarce or family demand outpaces supply. So again, part of the local planning council is that we pull together data, identify needs assessment. One of the things we do also is identify how much funding is available for subsidized childcare versus how many families qualify for subsidized childcare, which kind of goes along with the facilities, but now I'm getting into access, which is the next goal. I'm going to hold on that one. In terms of facilities, some of the things that the local planning council has added into the child care plan, now known as the Child Care Blueprint, is to work closely with community, with county, with city members. Perhaps there's not specific funding dedicated to it, but there might be opportunities for collaboration. For example, if there is a facility, such as a rec center or a church, a school district, any available area that's willing to bring in a child care center, if they do something like lower the rent or take away the rent altogether or go ahead and take on the utilities payment, this type of stuff, we know in San Diego County it's very expensive to live here, rent is very expensive. So if we can get those costs lower, we can then get more child care centers into facilities and hopefully use any additional funding available for things like workforce wages. I don't want to go into too much detail. I know that Sarina passed around the blueprint itself. This is a short abbreviated version of it, just a few key highlights so that you see all of the goals themselves and what you can do to support. So I'm going to go on now to the last goal, goal number 3, which is about access.
Can I ask just a quick question?
Yes.
Serena talked about local planning councils, and so did you. Are they the same one?
They are the same one. So Sarina is the chair of our Child Care and Development Local Planning Council.
And is
We get
it
to-
local to the city or
The county, it's the San Diego County,
Okay.
yes. Every county across the state actually is legislated to have a planning council, which advises their board of supervisors and superintendent of schools. The other wonderful thing about the planning council is who is a part of it. As we know, when it comes to providing feedback or information about how to overcome or mitigate challenges or barriers, what you really want to have is people at the table who are parents receiving the child care, people who are the ones delivering those child care services, so our providers, those individuals who perhaps are regulating services like community care licensing, as well as those supporting the services like First 5 San Diego. And these are individuals, along with many other community representatives, public agency representatives, that make up the Child Care and Development Local Planning Council here in San Diego County. And that's why it's so special, so powerful that they were able to contribute quite a bit of the content of the Child Care Blueprint, because they're the ones in it, right? They're receiving the care, they're delivering the care, they're regulating it, they're supporting it with funding or training. Also, our resource and referral agency, YMCA of San Diego County, is part of the local planning council, which is wonderful. Yeah. Thank you for asking. Okay, I'm going to keep going to goal number 3 here. So goal number 3 is about access. And this one says, all families have access to childcare that meets their needs and preferences and supports their children's learning, physical and mental health, and social emotional development. So when it comes to access, we want to make sure that it's available and affordable, right? Are there enough facilities or offerings available for the families, and can the families get there easily? Is there transportation available, or are they close enough to get there in a way that works for them? Are they able to afford it, or are there subsidies available to support them in attending that child care setting? And that's where I get into the data again. What we have found is that in San Diego County, we do get child care subsidies from the state, and they do provide opportunities for some families to get services, but it's not enough. So again, we're doing quite a bit, but just not enough. For infant toddler care, for example, when we look at the total number of families who qualify for subsidized care and the total number of slots available for subsidized care, we're at a just over 95% need for infant toddler care subsidies. When we look at preschool, again, looking at those numbers, how many children are in families that qualify for care versus how many have an actual slot for subsidized care, it's looking more like 75% need. Now this is going to continue to go down because of the opening of transitional kindergarten, who are now serving 4-year-olds. However, you did hear some of the unintended consequences of now our other subsidized programs serving only 0 to 3-year-olds and the costs associated with that. And when it comes to costs, I know a little bit ago, I think it was Sarina, where we talked about the minimum wage and how that might work. And I don't know if you all know, but sometimes we have family child care home providers that don't even get minimum wage. They don't even pay themselves sometimes. They're just meeting the needs of the families. So that's why the average generally is so low, right? Because we're looking at that span of opportunities there. I'm going to pause there and see if we have specific questions about that. Yes?
I don't have a
question, but I just want to say, as an early educator, back in the 90s when I was, beginning or starting out in this field, I was discouraged to join the field because of low wages by my professors, teachers, colleagues. 25 years later, we're still in the same situation, and it saddens me. But I do thank all of you for what you're doing and for this platform.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, so it is a crisis. This is something we've been seeing for many, many years. There have been some ups and downs. The COVID pandemic really did exacerbate the need for early learning care providers and facilities that shut down. Yes.
Yes, I have a question. I'm having trouble understanding how the plan is going to work when there's no funding really. So, so here's a question, right? What do you think is the best, because, and historically it's been underfunded, right? So what are the major challenges that the local planning council has seen or sees that are basically exacerbating this lack of funding or lack of willingness? What is it? Can you elaborate on the lack of funding? What can we do, or
You got it.
Summarize the question a little just for the video.
Yeah, so very briefly, we got a question about the lack of funding. And so here we have this childcare blueprint, this plan of how we'd like to move forward. However, not all of it has been funded just yet, and funding has been an issue in early learning care for some time now. So the question was, well, how are we going to do it? We have these plans to do it without the money to do it. Little by little, things have been adjusting, but again, we've gotten support, just not enough. So for example, those grants that I just described from the state, that's supporting the workforce quite a bit, right? We're getting them to a higher quality that they can deliver early childhood education programming, offering stipends for college coursework, for attending trainings, things of that sort. We got some funding from the County of San Diego to support the retention of workforce members. They get retention stipends so long as they are staying in the field for at least 9 months and continuing there. However, I can't speak directly to where the funding will come from. I know the County of San Diego recently approved some funding to actualize the childcare blueprint itself. And I think Jane, you might have mentioned it earlier, right when we got started, about what some of those funding recommendations were, or approvals, I should say, were. So we don't have all of the answers yet, but we're hoping that with community involvement and the continuation of the Child Care Development Local Planning Council, those in the field, those delivering the services, receiving the services, that we can come to solutions. The other really nice thing about the Child Care Blueprint that you all have is next to each of the goals, there's a section that lists what can be done. So those are things that perhaps community members can continue to support, vote for, etc. Right? Well, yes.
My suggestion would be to add a question about this to all the candidates in the candidate forums.
Good point.
And be sure you're asking your candidates what they support. They're all running for city council and things. We need to. The point of this meeting today is to be educated, and we have to pass that on to the movers and shakers. Thanks.
Yes, so we had, sorry, I'm repeating one of the comments that we got. One of the things that can be done potentially is from the audience members, she said that perhaps we could ask questions of the legislators, those coming in, those people who we're voting for, ask questions about their plans for early learning and care and the ways in which they're supporting. All right, well, if that's it, I'll turn it over to Blake.
I talk really loud too. Well, hi everybody, my name is Blake Hofsted. I'm the Director of Organizing for Parent Voices. We organize parents across the state of California to advocate primarily for childcare, some other areas, but we're going to stick to childcare today. I feel like y'all like set this beautiful table for me to talk about. So there's a lot of stuff I don't really need to repeat, but I kind of wanted to address a couple of things from the supply and demand lens of things, and then also get into questions about funding and questions about like, okay, well, we're all kind of frustrated with how our childcare system is set up. What can we do about it, right? So first of all, I'm not going to repeat a lot of the stats that these ladies have shared, but one thing that does stick out, right? 98% of the workforce is women. The majority of them are women of color. One of the lowest paid jobs that you can get. So just like imagine if we flip those demographics around. Like just think about an industry where 98% of the workforce are men and most of them are white men. Imagine me telling you, oh yeah, the average person makes minimum wage. You can't. Like it doesn't even compute in your head because of how we value labor in this country and who does it, and so how we pay them. It goes back, it's not even just decades, it's like centuries, right? It goes back to the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 who were the two groups that were excluded from these labor protections? Agricultural workers and domestic workers. Who does that work? Why weren't they protected, right? So it's frustrating at times in a state like California, who really, we really pride ourselves on our progressive values, and we had a governor who, when he was first elected, came in really talking about childcare in a way that no governor candidate in California had ever done before. We went from Jerry Brown, who kind of had a view of childcare as like kind of babysitting, it was not the best. And then we had a governor candidate coming in like, I love childcare, I'm going to make childcare a priority. In his first budget proposal, when he was first elected, for the first time in California's history, there was a chapter on childcare. Before, you had to go look for it. You had to go look through education, you had to look through Health and Human Services to try to find out what the state of California had planned for childcare. Now it was a whole chapter for itself. I remember seeing that now's the time, Now is the time. We're really going to get what we've been fighting for. Flash forward to now. Now there is no longer a childcare chapter in the same governor's budget proposals. And we have to fight. I know I don't want to call you out, Miriam, but the union had to really fight an uphill battle for a long time to get a contract agreement to move us towards paying childcare workers what they deserve. I work for an organization, Parent Voices, and so we work with parents. We work hand in hand with providers, right? We don't see things in terms of this is a parent thing, this is a provider thing. If you ask any parent what they think about their childcare provider, they're going to be like, I love that person. That's one of the most important people in my life, right? So parent issues are provider issues are parent issues. We talk a lot about subsidized childcare. I think Sarina laid that out really nicely, right? We do have this subsidized system in California. Anyone who makes under 85% of the state median income, which is a pretty good amount of money, right? We're allowing a lot of people to qualify for a childcare subsidy. However, the state of California, this is something that's required by the federal government. They had always charged families these family fees, right? You can't just get it. You still have to pay for it. This comes from welfare ideas in the 90s, where we had to really teach, low-income people the value of money by making them pay so they could learn how to budget, which is ridiculous, right? But that's kind of where it came from. It's a federal mandate that we have to charge families something. Well, the state of California, if you're a family of 4 people and you make $5,000 a month, right? 4 people, $5,000 a month. For your subsidized childcare, they would charge you $370 a month. Right? So you have families for their subsidized care, sometimes they were paying up to $600, almost $8,000 a year for subsidized childcare. You can go to SDSU with that money, right? And to change that in California, this was a California thing. There were many other states who were not doing that. That same family of 4 making $5,000 a month, if they lived in North Dakota, the state of North Dakota would have charged them $35, right? So we're California, we kind of look down at these other states sometimes as we have all these progressive values, and we're in these families' pockets. And that was a really uphill battle. There was a bill that passed in 2022 that would have changed that and eliminated family fees for most families, and the governor vetoed that, right? The child care governor, And this is not to say that progress had not been made during his tenure as governor. We have expanded those subsidized slots to give more families access. The union did finally get an agreement after a long battle to move towards a cost of care model. But if you look at the budget this year, there's no real plan to move towards this agreement that's supposed to come into effect in 2025. Another key piece of information is like a lot of times when, you know, I'm sure a lot of people in this room know what it's like to go advocate and go ask for things that cost money. And it's, you know, we gotta really check the economic realities of the budget this year, and we're gonna just look and look and look, you know. The state of California's budget is almost $300 billion. Every single year, that's what they spend. When the governor came into office, the general funds, there's different funds, the general fund was about $147 billion when he came into office. It was $230 billion last year. So our governor has also overseen one of the largest expansions of state money of any governor ever in the history of the United States. That's at $83 billion more that we had as a state last year than we had when he came into office. That's more money than 42 states even spend every year, period, right? So when we talk about things that do cost money, right, moving to a model of cost of care is going to cost a lot more money because we're finally going to be paying people who've been surviving off of peanuts for as long as we've had childcare in the United States. We're finally going to be paying them a salary closer to what they actually deserve. That costs money, like billions of dollars. But the frustrating part is like, we can find it. If we make that a priority, it is possible. From the demand side of things, right, so I don't want to talk too much about facilities because I don't know too much about it, but until we start paying providers more money, we could have a whole bunch of open facilities with no one to even work in them, because who's trying to make $16 an hour in San Diego? Nobody, you know? The In-N-Out posters is like starting at $19 an hour, and that's great, right? That's good. They should be making money too. It's just unfortunate that childcare providers do this really critical work, and we've been subsidizing, you know, the cost of care on their backs for so long. From the demand side of things, in California, there are currently a little bit over 2 million families who actually qualify for these subsidized spots. We serve about 250,000 of them. So we have over 1.5 million families, almost 2 million families who qualify, who the state has determined you should not have to pay these market rates for childcare because your family does not have enough money to do so. There's almost 2 million of those families, so we're just like, sorry, you know, we have no funding for you to actually get a slot. So what can we do about it? One is from a state level perspective. If you are ever talking with state level elected officials, assembly members, or senators, ask them, what are you doing to push our state and push our governor towards implementing a cost of care model? Right? The union had this agreement. It's supposed to come into effect in 2025. It's not going to just magically happen. Right? There were supposed to be a bunch of new slots coming online, and we've managed to like call timeout and pause those slots because, you know, there's no money. So we can pause things, we can push things. It's not going to happen unless we make it happen. So asking elected officials, how are we moving towards that cost of care model so that providers earn what they deserve, and that then we're able to then invest in supply because we have an infrastructure ready to receive more providers. That's one thing. The second thing is at the local level. I will say too, like, I don't want to sound all doom and gloom. When you would go to the county like 7 years ago and you were like, hey, let's talk about childcare, they would just be like, no, like we do not do that. You know, you need to go to the state. So don't come to us, the County Board of Supervisors. So the fact that we have a blueprint, we have a county board that seems sort of keen on implementing elements of this blueprint is a massive, massive change from where we were 7 years ago. But kind of like as Des was saying, it's like you're kind of playing with a hand that doesn't allow you to do too much in the absence of funding. What's happened in other counties across the state, there have been ballot measures and tax initiatives to secure year after year annual funding that you can count on to invest into a childcare infrastructure. Just giving one example is Measure C in Alameda County, if people want to like look that up and get familiar with it. Measure C is going to generate $150 million in revenue every single year for the County of Alameda to invest in provider wages and slots, subsidized slots for families. There's also an additional component of that that's for infant health and maternal health. So I think politically it works really well when you pair childcare with like pediatric hospitals, because it's like two groups that no one is really like anti. No one's like, I don't really like pediatric health, or that's not for me. So that's kind of a winning strategy. That's something that hopefully we can pursue in San Diego to secure that year-over-year annual funding. It's very, very critical that parents and providers are at the decision-making table when we're trying to understand how that should get structured, so they're not left out of the conversation, right? So state level, we really need to move towards the cost of care model before anything else happens. We do want to still get investing in slots. You know, the governor a couple years ago said we're going to expand childcare by 200,000 slots by 2025. Now that's been 2027 because of this pause. And it's interesting, right? The reason why he says that we can pause is because, well, we're already meeting demand. And it just feels kind of weird that that's the logic. There are a lot of families, and I won't say this is too much the case in San Diego, but there are a lot of families who don't even know that subsidized childcare is a thing, you know? So to say that we're meeting demand when I was in a meeting recently with about 35 parents from an unnamed county. I said, how many of you have heard of the alternative payment program for voucher-based subsidized childcare? And out of 35 people, like 4 people raised their hands. And when I said, how many people of you have even heard of these agencies who give childcare subsidies, it was like 6 people out of 35. So that's only like 10, 15, 20% of people even knowing that subsidized childcare is an option, because you're so conditioned to it not being there for generations that you don't even look for it, you know? So anyway, state level, we want to continue investing in slots. We want to continue putting pressure to move towards a cost of care model. Otherwise, we're going to keep asking for the same thing year over year over year. And we're going to have a system at the end of the day that only serves 10 to 15% of the families who actually need it. And then at the local level, I'm really curious now that we have, there's been this political shift in the county. Is a ballot measure kind of more realistic? Is that something that the public would vote for? Is that something, as you all go about your lives, like talking with people like, hey, what do you think about childcare? Do you think it'd be like, did you know that childcare providers are the worst paid workers in our society and do this really important work? Like, no one who actually has ever had a kid 0 to 5 thinks that it's okay what we pay childcare workers. But once you're kind of out of that range, I think a lot of people, it falls off your radar as like a political topic as much, you know? So there's not like this sustained interest in like, we need to fix this problem. Once it's fixed for you, it's kind of like, all right, I can move on, right? And there's other problems that are continuing to like confront me and my family. So yeah, hopefully we move to that place, and hopefully there is energy in a few years in San Diego to pass a ballot measure so that we have the revenue that we need for the county to not be so hamstrung in what it can do. So we can keep pushing the state, at the same time we can still supplement what the county's able to do to hopefully invest in the childcare infrastructure that we all want. So, yeah.
Question. Well, first a comment. I think since childcare providers are also caregivers, I would think that it will be very important if we focus on the mental health piece of it for the children, you know, who are our future, and we're in a crisis mode too in terms of mental health, and also for the caregivers themselves, right? So that means more funding, not only the minimum wage, but all these supports that you know, the mental health piece would need for a caregiver, right?
Yeah.
But my question for you would be, I've read about the exodus of California being so unaffordable and people are leaving to Florida, Texas. Have you come across that? Because I would think that now it's not really that easy to project, you know, to make a projection of families, the needs, the slots, and all that. Or is this a variable to factor in the exodus of people leaving California? What do you hear from the parents?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The parents that I specifically work with they're here. You know, there's definitely been parents who have left, but it's not, I personally have not experienced this mass exodus of like our parent members within Parent Voices leaving California. It doesn't mean that people are not leaving California. However, like rather than factoring that into projections for how many families might need this, to me it's like, oh man, we should really invest in this infrastructure if we want people to not leave our state because it's too unaffordable anymore. Maybe if we had a robust childcare ecosystem that cared for their kids while they went to work, they wouldn't be in a position where they feel like financially forced out of the state, right? And then I think it's a really good point what you mentioned about mental health and how do we take care of the mental health of the little ones, how do we take care of the mental health of the people doing the work? And when you're making $16 an hour, you're going to have financial related stress that has an impact on your mental health. There's no way around that. And I don't mean to say that money magically waves away all mental health issues. Childcare still can be a stressful job even if you are making really good money. But that's a component of it too. And I think that's a first step. I don't want to speak for childcare providers necessarily, but if I was a childcare provider making $16 an hour and then you said, hey, here's a bunch of mental health support for you, I'd be like, well, can I make more money first? Can I make sure that I have enough food to eat? Because if we don't do that, then why are we? It's kind of putting the horse before whatever it is, the cart before the horse.
Well, just a quick comment. I do know many family childcare providers, and they're struggling because they are the children that they're dealing with. It's it's beyond their capacity to treat or to care for children that have a lot of anxiety, stress, and so forth.
Yeah.
So they are struggling.
Yeah. I don't want to dismiss that at all because you're right. Yeah.
Thank you.
You have to repeat that.
Oh, repeating so I guess just the questions and comments were one, emphasizing the need to invest in mental health supports for both the kids in receiving care as well as the people providing that care for them. And then, the question was about how do we sort of factor in this, exodus of people leaving California because of high costs. Yeah, thanks, Farrell.
Yeah, this is related. There needs to be a place for child care providers to call if they're not associated with the school system to get help for mental health problems of the children that they're serving. There needs to be an investment into having an office where people, and I don't know if that exists. I know it exists for the school system. I don't know if it exists in general, but that needs to happen. But my other problem is, how do we go to the state for funds when we hear every day that they have this huge deficit, that they're getting millions or billions less tax money this year than they expected or budgeted for? And on top of that, with the taxes already being so high that they're going to low tax states like Texas and Florida or Nevada, how do we approach state lawmakers when that's all they're going to say to us?
Yeah, and that's fair. I think it's important to differentiate short-term budget realities from long-term. We have this history of budgetary decisions during times of tremendous surplus. That's why I mentioned the budget expanding by $83 billion in a 5-year period. We didn't solve the issue in those 5 years when we had $83 billion of revenue growth over those years. So yes, this year we are projected to face a $38 billion deficit in the budget. Now, that can get a lot smaller. That was the number that they told us last year, and it ended up being closer to 12 or 15, right? So there's always the chance that we're overshooting. But to me, it's you didn't do it when we had a surplus. So I'm not going to stop asking you because there's a deficit. You still have the same responsibility. Corporate tax rates in California have effectively been cut in half since the 1980s. They're now less than 5% in what the effective corporate tax rate is. So we're leaving billions, tens of billions of dollars on the table every single year from corporate tax breaks. So that could be a question that you ask too is, are we exploring revenue generating measures, closing some of these loopholes that we've continued to open and open and open and open since the 1980s that force our state to leave money on the table? I know there's been efforts to reform Prop 13 so that Disneyland doesn't have to pay taxes based on the value of when they brought the property in 1950, whatever. And that would generate tens of billions of dollars in revenue if we closed the corporate loophole for Prop 13. So there's other strategies that we can pursue, but at the end of the day, when you have a problem that's been going on for decades and decades and decades, it feels a little disingenuous for elected officials to say, we're looking at a deficit this year,
I would add, there are countries who do this better than we do, funding-wise. I mean, it isn't unknown in the world, but I realize some of that is different cultures, different attitudes about government, but, we too could.
Yeah, this is aspirational, but it's not like there's no examples of this happening ever, anywhere, yeah. Okay.
So feel free to make comments, ask questions. Is there
I'm just going to add, since we are a small group, we were hoping we could just even have a little interaction among ourselves. So, but any comments? Any wisdom? I think we've got the wisdom of our speakers here.
So Blake, is there any current, this time around, legislation that's being brought forward that we should be supporting right now? Or obviously, the league does visit candidates, and Berlin mentioned we need to bring up to these candidates. Where do they stand on this, and are they willing? When you mentioned, I think I had heard it vaguely, that the governor had vetoed it. I was just furious. I thought, how can you veto this? It's so critical. So I think we really need to, as members, league or non, let people know how critical this is, and we need to support anything that's coming forward that will help us. Yeah. Oh, sure.
Yeah, so I should just clarify too that that family fee thing that I was talking about. That was one. We did win that in the budget last year, so that's no longer a fight that we need to fight.
Is that gone forever, or just for the?
It's done. It's gone.
There's no more family fee.
There's no more family fees for families making under 75% of state median income. Okay. We're still required by the federal government to charge some fees. It caps at 1% for families who make 85%, so it's like from 75 to 85 you're charged 1%, but it's like $60 a month now for families making pretty decent income. So that example that I like to use, because it's nice and clean numbers, but that $5,000 they're not paying a fee anymore. So most families had their fees wiped out. In terms of legislation, I don't know if Miren, you know the bill numbers, but there are bills that are moving us towards the cost of care model. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I can look those up and send them out to the people, to you, Penny, to get out to the people who registered for this. But again, because it's a lot of times in years when there is a budget deficit, we're often fighting just to maintain what we already have, and we're not really having that growth mindset. But certainly, like the cost of care stuff it's stuff that we can't just continue to hand wave away in times of when we wish the budget looked a little bit nicer, because it's been too long already.
So I'm not even entirely sure to direct the question to maybe the group of you over there. I noticed in the blueprint there was talk about innovative financing. I didn't hear any of you really talk to work with the private sector, partnership with the private sector, and in particular, just thinking about the hotel industry or the biotech industry, where you have a lot of workers, many low-wage workers in those sectors who have those childcare needs, and the opportunities that may be there, whether it's for space in buildings or whether it's some kind of partnership or contribution to, or pairing of, a subsidy plus some contribution from the industry. If there's been any talk about that, and whether they have been part of the focus groups or part of some of the planning documents and work that you have been discussing. Thanks.
I can share really briefly that the Childcare and Development Local Planning Council did recently open a new committee. So it's just a committee within the overall council called the Public-Private Resource Committee. One of the things they would like to do is bring in the public sector and see ways in which we can communicate, ways in which we can collaborate, public sector, private sector. Again, it's a brand new committee, so there hasn't been a lot of movement with it yet, and we're not sure how far we can get as an advisory council. So I do want to say that the LPC, wonderful group of people, very dedicated, very knowledgeable, it's an advisory body, not an advocating body. So we're unable to advocate for some of these things, but we are A-okay advising, basically, giving the information and letting others do the advocacy if they'd like. But hopefully more to come on that question.
I'll add that the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce also has a vested interest in childcare. So we've spoke there before about the needs of childcare and the wages for childcare workers. And so that's one of the collaborative partners that we ensure to keep up with updates is the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce, so they can then kind of feed this information to their partners also in the private sector. I can add a little bit to that. I can add that the county is funding through the American Rescue Plan Act funds that we receive from the federal government. We are funding certain portions of the blueprint. One area, for example, is, I wish I could announce the contractor, but I can't, I don't think, for a few more days. We're working with a technical assistance group to create, the blueprint is beautiful and it's 40 pages long, and so we need an implementation plan for that. There's a lot of different components, and so one of the things that we're doing is reaching out to a lot of private business holders, entities, large apartment complex owners, property owners, and we have an interest list, and so maybe that's something, an area for us to connect with Andrea's team to kind of share that information. And I didn't know about that group, so I'm glad that you just shared that. So we're looking to partner with more private entities as well and really just educate them on the tax benefits of providing this for their employees. We've also been working really closely, not related, but you reminded me of it with your comment, Michelle, was when we're working with apartment complex owners and just property owners in general that own residential homes. There is a Senate bill that allows people that are renting to own child care businesses out of their home. And so a lot of property owners, they don't allow their renters to do that, but there really are protections for them to do that. And so it's really just, we've been trying to promote that a lot. And so we're working with different landowner associations and things like that.
Are there any other comments, questions? Yes. Yes, go.
Yes, so that your comment reminded me of something that I would like to share. I'm an entrepreneur and also a business owner. So we have an affordable housing company, and we are basically focusing on a model that we want to incorporate to the community, which is building affordable housing and include a childcare on site.
That's great. I'm just going to repeat that for the video to be sure that it is a proposal with affordable housing to have childcare associated with it. That sounds great. I think we've been going, yeah.
I just was gonna that Congresswoman Jacobs, when we're talking about Congresswoman Jacobs, and we're talking about elected officials that have really supported and promoted childcare. Congresswoman Jacobs has been a true champion for childcare in the early educator workforce, and when we're talking about private partnerships, she earmarked, I think it was $1 million in federal funding that would come through a company called Mission Driven Finance, and what they do is try to ensure that family childcare home owners that we were talking about, sorry, I was thinking about this while the other person was speaking, that they would have their own home instead of renting, because renting is so insecure and the property management and the rent is so high that these are women of color that own these, that rented these homes but had that insecurity because it was not their own. And so loans, using the funding from Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs, who getting loans because they weren't able to get a loan from the bank. They would now get like a community-driven loan, so it's like a loans for good. So they're encouraging people to invest and do loans in that way instead of through a bank where they would be too small to get that loan. So that was another kind of interesting way to do that. And if that was not explained correctly, what would he be? My brother-in-law? I don't know. My husband's brother works for Mission Driven Finance, and I'm sure he'd love to talk to you all about it. Okay. Yeah, I'm good. Thanks.
All right, Penny, you and I. Oops. Okay, anybody else have comments? I think this has been an extremely educational program. All our speakers are fabulous. I even learned a lot. And I hope that we can all move forward, as I said, in talking to legislators, looking at bills, and really move forward on this. I think for the first time, we obviously have a city department, a county department, and a lot of interest on our legislative folks to move forward. I think it's kind of fun. My Sarah Jacobs, their aunt, Michelle, what would it be? Was my kid's preschool teacher. So Sarah Jacobs has indirectly a very, very close desire and interest in childcare because her family always was really into that kind of thing. So anyway, I thank you all for coming and your interest. I think, and hopefully we will move forward in the right direction. I'm optimistic for a change that we're going to begin to do some really positive things. And have a good rest of your day and week. And again, thank you, speakers. You're all terrific.